Welcome to Trauma Talks, real conversations about real struggles, real strength. And I'm your host, Trauma Saves. After facing life-threatening cancer, trauma didn't just break me, it rebuilt me. You can even say that trauma saved my life. And now we're here to show how struggle can lead to strength, one story at a time. Today's guest, Sage Breslin, has lived through more in one lifetime than most of us could ever imagine. From being born clairvoyant, surviving childhood sexual abuse and trafficking, to healing from traumatic brain injury and enduring the loss of children, flatlining multiple times, and ultimately beating bone marrow cancer. Her story is one of divine strength, radical healing, and unstoppable resilience. This is more than survival, this is transformation. So let's welcome Sage to the show now. Hi, Sage.
Hi,
How's it going?
it's going okay.
Awesome, awesome. How's your mental health doing?
It's fantastic, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
good, good.
Sometimes the physical health kind of goes downhill, but mentally strong, emotionally, spiritually, yeah, right at it.
Right, right. Yeah, the mental is, I think, the most important thing. I think everything kind of falls in line once you get your mental health and mental fortitude together.
I think it certainly makes a difference, that's for sure.
Right. So, I want to get into some of your story a little bit. Can you share a little bit about your early experiences and what life was like growing up for you?
I can. It's interesting. I often get asked about my story. Hey, tell us about your story. And I always have this pause because my story is so complex and so elongated, if you will,
Right,
and so much trauma throughout my lifetime that I almost feel like it's a challenging story to play out because people will stop me, after once, twice, three, and they're like, "Are you kidding me?"
right.
Yeah, well, except that this is what has made me who I am.
Exactly.
I got super lucky in the sense that I came from a very loving family. My parents had their own struggles, and I think that in many ways, it made them susceptible to not really seeing what was going on with me.
Mm-hmm.
Had loving grandparents. I had and still do have a brother that I'm deeply connected to. Um, but I just think that, unfortunately, I don't know if they didn't know what they were looking at or they just were so oriented to their own issues that they
Right.
missed it.
Yeah.
Because now, I mean, I spent the first 20 years of my professional life treating children and adult survivors of sexual abuse. So, to me, the signs are all very clear. And the signs that I showed as a youth following my sexual abuse were also very clear.
Mm-hmm. I
But,
understand.
I was raised in a culture that valued children being more like adults. And while I think we were very loved, the whole children are to be seen until they're invited to be heard
Mm-hmm.
definitely was true for us. I mean, I think my brother and I were the first two grandchildren. And in my grandparents' house, I mean, we spent a lot of time with their friends you know, we learned,
Right.
you act quietly, you play the good hostess or junior hostess, if you will. And I think that had a big impact on, how I allowed people to see, or rather not see, what was
Right.
happening to me. And I was threatened by, at least one of the perpetrators. So, I had vested interest in not telling and, didn't until I was in my 20s.
Yeah. Or maybe when you gain the strength to kind of come forward with that information, right?
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, I did actually begin to share the information about my early childhood sexual abuse. And like in high school, I began to disclose that, but not to my family.
Mm.
And I didn't come out to my family until I was in my 20s. And
Wow.
that was received like by my father very, very well. I couldn't have asked for a better response. My mom was still very much ill with her addiction, and I just don't think she could hear it.
Right, right. So, do you think at some point maybe your life kind of felt like it wasn't your own in the beginning, or how did you shift your worldview, during that transitional time?
I mean, no. I mean, my answer is from the time I was 5, I felt very much like I wasn't in charge of my body or, what, what I could do with it or who I could speak to, or I definitely felt like an object that was ruled by other people. And
Hmm.
and that really, once I turned 15 and I was groomed by this cartel in Los Angeles, once I was trafficked, I mean that, that's like all bets were off, right?
Right.
Everything altered. I mean, I had no sense of self. The worth was designed by somebody else. There was no self-worth. And I struggled with that whole notion of self-worth into my 50s.
How did you shift your worldview then? What was the catalyst for that?
Later on in my life, I realized that even though I'd had therapy, even though I'd done experiential work, even though I felt like I dealt with things, I really hadn't. They were still wreaking havoc with my career, with my ability to show up and be seen, with my ability to earn income. Those
Hmm.
things were all being governed by, stuff below the surface. And a big piece of the stuff
Right.
was that somebody else put a price on my head and said, this one is worth X number of dollars.
Wow.
And I didn't, it's not that I didn't remember, I never forgot. Um, it was so heinous that I shoved it into the vault and I couldn't look at it as having an impact in my daily life. I
Hmm.
didn't want to.
Right. Right. I get that.
But then
And
it really, I mean, it came to a point where I realized like I've got to be able to move forward. What is in the way? And I
right.
had some incredible coaches that and shaman who helped guide me to the source of all that nonsense. And once I began really unpacking it and speaking about it publicly, I mean, everything changed.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I mean, there really is so much to your story from the child abuse and trafficking and everything. I mean, looking back, how do you think you survived those darkest moments?
Well, in the beginning, this is a kind of a weird story. So I was a competitive swimmer from age 5 until I stopped really swimming at 17. Excuse me. And the country club where we swam for the team was within walking distance from our house. And so during our summers, I would walk back and forth, sometimes twice,
Hmm.
like home for lunch and back.
Hmm.
And as I got older, I started to hear what was an interview, and if I could describe it, an interview of myself at like 80 years old.
Hmm.
And it was clear to me from the interview that I was listening to in my head that I had become celebrated, that I had something to offer, that other people really enjoyed learning from me. And I must have heard that interview like thousands of times. And so I knew that I would make it.
Okay, that's
Like I knew I was going to survive.
right.
I mean, when things really turned upside down and I realized what was my reality inside the cartel, because believe me, for the first year and a half, I thought this man was my boyfriend.
Wow. So
I
you were
mean, the
manipulated
grooming
that
was,
much to the point where you really
oh,
believed it.
I really believed it.
Wow.
I really did not see everything that was happening. And
Hmm.
the night where, I was sold as a party favor, I I think I catapulted into oblivion. And when I came to at my parents' home, I thought I can't survive this. There
Mm,
is no way to survive what's just happened to me. And I won't go into the detail, but let's just say it was pretty grisly.
I see.
I mean, I'd made it that far, sort of just, taking care of myself and putting one foot after the other. And I just thought I can't do it anymore. And I ended up taking a bottle of pills and laying down on the floor of my room. And the clock says I was clinically dead for 22 minutes.
Wow.
And
Wow.
my recollection of the events that took place, what I believed to be true was that I got in my car and I went to the church where my mother used to worship, and that I knocked on the sanctuary doors and was let in by a priest who then spent the night talking with me. So that all happened, just didn't happen in a body.
Right.
It
No, I understand
happened,
that.
in,
Um,
in the tween space. And what I really learned was I was so ashamed and disconnected from God by that time. I was so terrified that there was no way, excuse me, that I could survive
mhm. So,
and that I could be
oh.
in that embrace. And, what I was told during those 22 minutes was that's not true. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
not.
right.
Just the
And
opposite.
right, yeah, no,
We
that's
got to.
that's very empowering actually. So you would consider that like a spiritual experience that you had after an overdose.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, they call it a near-death experience. In my case, it was an after-death experience. And
mhm.
I mean, when I gleaned that in the tween space, like literally launched into my body, up off my feet, into the bathroom, puking my guts out. And not until all of that did I actually lay down on my bed and go to sleep.
Well,
You know,
I'm interested. How would you say that moment? How would that moment? How did that moment change your relationship with life and with yourself? Really?
I, everything changed. It altered everything. I realized through that awakening that I could never, ever be disconnected from God. And everything about that relationship, not religion, but the relationship with God, spirituality, right?
Right, right.
That took over my life. That is the
Interesting.
thing that time and time again saved my life. And obviously like I've
Right.
had extraordinary trauma and just over and over and over again, voluminous trauma.
Hmm.
And every single time it was my relationship with God that made the difference, that brought me back.
That's so
And,
interesting. Hearing you say
and
that, I mean, I'm getting chills, like, because reliving some of my experience as well, and
yeah,
having a very similar, uh, I guess, perception of it. Other people
yeah,
might have that experience, but they perceive it a little bit differently. But the
yes,
perception of it being a spiritual connection to something that's greater, something a more powerful being or entity, whatever you want to call it,
right,
and then just somehow getting the strength from that, knowing that you're blessed, that you're taken care of in a sense. You kind of just have to live this life and step into your purpose, and just using those traumatic experiences to empower others that unfortunately it seems like some people are kind of blind to it. They don't even know that this stuff exists, and that sometimes these traumatic experiences can actually be some of the best things that can happen to us if you're able to use it in the proper way, or in the way that's conducive to living a better, more healthier life.
yeah. I definitely think that it altered my view of who I was, certainly 100%, right?
Yeah.
It helped me remember, and when I say remember, it's like RE-MEMBER, right? Remember.
Right. Right.
It put me back together in a different, um the puzzle pieces got reordered, right? It
Yeah.
became a different life. And
Right.
I really came to understand I have a purpose here, I have a mission here. And while I may stumble, the mission is there for me to do as long
Hmm.
as I'm here on this planet. And, initially, I really embraced my mission as a trauma psychologist to help people like myself recover, to survive, and then later to thrive. It
Hmm.
wasn't until my cancer journey that I really, really came to understand like my end game, what my
Hmm.
actual mission is here. And that really shifted gears for me once I kind of came through that funnel, through that vortex.
Hmm.
I began to realize how to actually enable people to fully surrender what we call, the narcissist magnet, like
Hmm.
magnet to unhealthy or toxic relationships. And I've tried a lot of different terms, but magnet has come to be the best. When you think you're doing everything you can to be in a healthy relationship, but you keep picking the same unhealthy relationships.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah,
When you've
far
left
too well.
the job with the toxic narcissist boss like 8 times, and you're like, what the heck? Is
Yeah,
there
how does this
not a
keep
boss out
happening?
there? Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Before we get into you mentioned your cancer journey, but before we get into that, I just want to know really quick after that that spiritual experience that you had, would you say that your healing was immediately, that it began immediately after that, or was it kind of a slow process?
Mm, um, yeah, what a hard question to answer. I mean, I think there
Well,
was,
yeah, I know the process is probably just continues over time, right? The more we know, the more we learn that we need to know. But
right,
I'm kind
right.
of curious, how quickly did you feel the transition of empowerment?
I mean, I think I felt it right away. When I came back realizing I can do this. I can
Hmm.
get out. And I fled. I mean, I really did get out and I started a new life. And I mean, other things happened along the way. And there were times where I felt like with every ensuing trauma, there were times when I'd say, like, oh my God, really? What
Right.
the
Yeah.
heck? I
Yeah.
thought you said I was here to do this big thing. And I think I acclimated to the fact that these things actually were showing up for a reason. When I had a brain injury, it actually predisposed me to be able to work with other brain injured people. It
Hmm.
allowed me to become better and better at talking to patients when I started working as a clinician because I was naturally and trained by my own traumas to begin to inquire about certain things with my patients that nobody else did.
Right.
And whether it was hormones or brain issues or abuse history or whatever,
Hmm.
um, slowly but surely it became clear to me that because I had had these experiences, I became relatable and they became relatable. Every
Right.
person who came in, it was very rare for me to meet someone that I couldn't relate to, that I couldn't
Hmm.
share some piece of my own story to help normalize what they'd been through.
Right. Yeah, I understand that
And it
so
made it worth
much.
it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like, I mean, at the time, maybe you didn't feel like it was worth it. At the time, like you said, you're like, what the hell is going on? Like,
Mm.
why me? Why do I keep going through this? And then you have those experiences where you meet someone who needs to hear your story. They need to
Yeah.
hear what you went through, and they need to know that what they've gone through is not although it may be life threatening, if it's not ending your life, that it's something that's a teachable moment. It's something that you can use to grow from.
Yes.
I completely relate to that. Um, so in regards to your cancer journey, you also had another shift in consciousness. Can you tell us kind of what that looked like?
Yeah. By the time I entered my cancer journey, I had already flatlined 8 times. I really began to embrace myself as a, cat of nine lives. And it was even when I got the diagnosis, I mean, it scared me because I had 5 kids, right? And I was a single mom.
Hmm.
And I was floored by, how am I going to do this and continue to earn income? How am I going to keep the house and keep the kids fed? And, you know, I had I can't even say it was fear, but I was very disquieted by all of that. But I didn't feel like it was gonna kill me. Like,
Interesting.
do you know, like Yeah, and I've got multiple myeloma. Like, if anything's gonna kill me, like, it's a
Yeah,
pretty nasty cancer. When the whole root of everything, your immune system, your blood, like everything, your bones, when that's got cancer, it's a pretty crappy diagnosis.
yeah.
But I didn't feel like in my bones, like, okay, I'm gonna die tomorrow.
Hmm. Yeah, I can relate
Because
to that feeling as well. Like you said, I mean, I had kids as well. My son was 5 years old, maybe six at the time. My daughter was 8 or 9. And again, I was never really scared for my life. I knew that there was a potential that I may not make it. And the part that hurt me the most was that I wasn't going to get to fulfill my obligations to my kids. I'm not
yeah,
going to get to teach them the things that I need to teach them. I'm not going to get to handle all the things that I need to handle. Um, and you can try to cram everything into this small amount of time, but like they're too young to even understand everything. These things take time where
right,
I need to wait until they're a teenager. I need to wait until they're an adult. I want to give these lessons out. There's like a floor plan for it or a map for it, but you
right.
can't cram it all in. So if I don't make it, then I'm not going to be able to fulfill my duties here. So
Yes.
I completely understand that feeling. But also, I felt confident that I was going to make it. If not knowing for sure, but I felt very confident that I was going to make it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I look at the cancer journey itself. I mean, and there are a lot of bells and whistles to it. And, I'm in remission for a year now. I'm in year
Congratulations.
9, thank you. And, things that I thought with the bone marrow transplant, I thought, okay, this will do it. With the chemo, this will do it. Then, and nothing did it. And at one point, my oncologist said to me, I need you to understand that remission is not the goal anymore. Our goal is just quality of life while you're here.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
remember hearing that and thinking like, you know, dagger to my heart. And what was interesting is, like then, excuse me, the FDA approved daratumumab, which is a different kind of multiple myeloma treatment. And I mean, after I'd been on it for 4 months, I remember the oncologist was like trying not to smile. And I'm just like, what is wrong with her? And she said, I got to tell you this thing. And I said, what is it? And she goes, you're in remission. You're in remission. And I said, what are you talking about? That you told me remission was like not going to happen.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
she's like, it works.
That's an amazing story. Yeah, that's so crazy. And the way your oncologist put it is actually, uh, even though you were in remission or you had cancer and went into remission, um, what they said about quality of life can be applied to anybody, no matter how healthy or sick you are. It's not really about how long you're here or what you're doing or whatever, but your quality of life while you're here is the
Yeah.
most important thing.
And it
100%.
it it drastically impacted like what came through for me. If I consider myself a vehicle, and I feel that I always have been. I mean, I was born clairvoyant. That's just a thing. I didn't make it happen. I think
Hmm.
probably, genetics for it in my family for sure.
Hmm.
But I always felt this connection to God, and I always believed that what I was hearing, because it was accurate, that was the thing, was, my direct link. And I think during the cancer journey, everything got sharper for me. I mean, there was a period of time where I just felt so awful, with the disease that it was really challenging.
Hmm.
But because of that idea that, we're not promised even tomorrow,
Hmm.
it really brought me present. And I started saying yes to things that I couldn't even think of, like, well, how am I even going to pay for that? But a friend of mine said, you have to come with us to Ireland. We're going to work with the high priestesses in Ireland. And I said, okay. And she's like, do you have X number of dollars? And I'm like, no. And she said, why don't you just call the gal who is running the retreat? And I called her and she said, okay, can you get your flight? And I said, I think I have enough room on a credit card to buy the flight. And she said, call me back tomorrow. And when I called her back, there were like 15 to 20 other women going
Hmm.
on this journey. And of those women, now I believe it ended up being three women in particular, they covered the cost of my retreat.
Wow.
They and they'd never met me,
Wow.
and they just made
Had they
it.
heard your story at that time?
They heard a little bit of my story from her.
Okay.
So I got to, meet and know and work with all of them. And, I have this undying love for them, of course.
Of course. Yeah.
But what opened up during the course of that retreat was almost incomprehensible about a past life.
Mm.
And, it'd take more hours than we've got to go into it, but let's just say it was a past life in Ireland that I'd come across before during a training that I did, and it was full blown. It appeared in Ireland, like the clan appeared to me in Ireland, worked with me while I was there. And I really felt so complete when I left. I felt like, wow, I've done a body of work. I think I'm healing myself, right, from the
Hmm.
inside out through time. I went back 3 years later, and what unfolded was absolutely unbelievable. And it was when I came back from that, I mean, maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, I had an epiphany. And I mean, I don't know what else to call it. While I was walking the dog, and that's kind of how weird it is. Like, while I was walking the dog, and then I had an epiphany. I'm
Uh,
not quite sure how I got from over by the senior center to home, but that's okay because the dog got me home.
the dog knows the way.
The dog knew the way, and I spent about an hour in meditation. And what downloaded through me was just, I mean, and then God walked in the room, like,
Yeah.
okay. And it
Yeah.
completely altered my professional life. It altered everything I had to offer. It all altered the services, and it altered my experience of both mental and physical health.
Hmm.
At that point in time, it became clear to me exactly what had happened throughout my life, not just in that lifetime, but in this lifetime, in this body. I finally understood what I had been doing, what I had been experiencing. And I was able to kind of hit the off button, is sort of how I look at it.
Right.
That I finally realized now I can be here. I'm complete with all of that. There's nothing more I have to do there. And I'm here to live in this body and live the rest of my life as God sees fit. And I mean, I went into remission a year later.
Yeah. If that's not God's work, I don't know what is.
Yeah,
That's an amazing story.
seriously.
That
You
that
don't have to
is
be religious to say, and then God walked into the room.
right. Right. No, God to me, at least, yeah, in my perception, God is not a religious thing. It's not always religious. I know it's commonly used in religion, but um, God kind of transcends religion, in my opinion. It's much
Well
more
said.
than that.
That's a great description.
So regarding all that, I mean that you've obviously been through unimaginable pain, yet you continue to rise time and time again. So I'm really curious, from your perspective, what does resilience mean to you?
Yeah, I would say that resilience means to me clearing the channel sufficiently so that the light comes through me. And I think about like when the house burns down, that's all you got to raise everything. You got to
Right.
clear the ground before you can start again.
Hmm.
And I think like that, Phoenix rising from the ashes, like, yeah, ish, right? You can rise
Hmm.
from those ashes, but then you got to clean house, right? You got to
Right.
clean it all away so that you can truly create new foundation to rise from.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, where you get broken down so many times, that You want to get back to where you were, or you want to get back to the top, but it's impossible to get there if you don't have a solid foundation. Everything starts with a good, solid foundation, and you just build up from there. Everything
Yeah.
has to come from that
And
starting
every
point.
time, a story of the structure gets toppled, you have to take it all down and start again.
Right.
And, I believe that the foundation I'm standing on is divine. And so it doesn't matter how many times I rebuild the house,
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah, well, when you've been through it so many times, I mean, you've got the blueprint already in your head, right? You know how to do it. Like it's on the back of your hand. You can just every time it gets knocked down, you're starting back from scratch, and you know exactly how to do it, where to start, what materials are needed, what mindset is needed, and I mean, having that whole structure be knocked down is just a part of life. It's going to happen to everybody. There's no way you can live life on earth without being knocked down, without being things being torn apart at some point. So the faster we learn how to build the solid foundation, the better we become at it. And the more that it happens, you get better and better and better at it. And you can recover so much quicker every time. And it's going
Yeah,
to probably happen to you again. It's going to probably happen to me again. But us having gone through what we've gone through, we know that's just a part of life and we'll be able to rebuild every single time.
yeah. There is definitely a reason why I love that movie Groundhog Day. Not just because it's funny, because it's also very painful to watch.
Yeah.
One of the things I really love is that in each lifetime, he's not just living, but he's also taking the knowledge back with him.
Hmm.
And while he doesn't remember it per se, it becomes clear that he's building this muscle memory. He's building this cellular memory for the best life he can live.
Yeah.
And when he finally is able to exit that journey and move forward to the next day, he's he's really allowed himself to transform.
hmm
Think, looking at, how do you flatline 8 times? How do you undergo all of these crazy traumatic experiences and come out laughing,
I mean, you're smiling, you're
and
beautiful, you're
smiling, right?
lively,
I
it's
mean,
crazy, right?
yes,
Any one
because
of those experiences could have taken somebody out and it would have
yeah,
been, they wouldn't have been able to recover from that. So clearly you have some sort of strength that is unimaginable to be able to come back from all of those things, and still, like I said, be sitting here smiling and being able to tell your story and help others to gain their strength.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think just to speak to the human experience, it's hard, man. Like,
Yes,
I
it
remember
is.
being in the hospital after my transplant and having so much pain, like all I could do was cry.
Hmm.
It, like,
And I'm
ah,
sure even that was painful, right?
and even that was painful, and
Yeah.
feeling like this is threatening my very existence. The woman in the room next to me died. People don't make it through transplant, and my oncologist told me that, first
Hmm.
thing you got to do is you've got to survive the transplant,
Hmm.
and I remember just that exquisite pain.
Hmm.
And there's a point at which it simply shifts. And that's the day where you take that breath in and you're like, okay, well, that was really shitty,
Hmm.
but it's not quite so today. Huh,
Right.
that's interesting, and you just sort of open up the storefront and say, okay, I'm going to be open for business because it sounds like something's going to change.
Hmm.
And I think that it's interesting that my whole professional life has been about transformation.
Yeah. I
Change.
mean, it's really hard to describe, but I guess the best way that I could describe it is like, just, I mean, it's like a light that just starts to radiate from you, right? Like you just start to feel like a grand awakening kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I had that exact same moment. I mean, I had the same experience where somebody passed away in the room next to me, and I'm seeing their family come in, and it's just knowing that they're dealing with something very similar to what I'm dealing with. This could literally be my family. This could be the same experience. And then, yeah, there's just a moment where you're just like, no more. This is not going to
Yeah.
happen anymore. And if it does, so what? It's like
Right. Right.
I'm just going to be graceful. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be positive. No matter what happens, if I
Yeah,
die tomorrow, I'm going to die a happy person. I'm going to die a strong person. I'm not going to let this mentally break me or spiritually break me. It may kill my physical body, but it's not going to kill me as a person, you know?
right, right.
So I can definitely relate to that. And it's very comical to be using the movie Groundhog's Day as like a microcosm for what
Yeah,
we've gone through, for the trauma that we've gone through in rebuilding our lives.
yeah.
So I'm actually curious of, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but how you turned your trauma into purpose, whether in business, motherhood, or in your spiritual work. How have you accomplished that?
Yeah, hey, great question. How did I do that? Um,
Sometimes we look back and we're like,
well,
yeah, how the hell did I even get through that, right? How did I do that?
yeah, I mean, I think, it all starts with who we are, right? Our relationship to ourself and our relationship to ourself is a direct relationship to a reflection of what our relationship with God is like. So
Mhm,
for me, I think that getting right with myself, getting oriented to the fact that, I'm not going to just be a survivor, I'm going to be a thriver. I'm going to learn how to show up. I'm going to learn how to make the best use of this life I've been given. So I think, first it started with transforming myself, my sense of who I was. I didn't really come to understand the language I was going to use for that until, about 5 years ago.
mhm,
And now I would refer to myself as an old soul. Everybody has referred to me that way at one point or another, but that was part of my epiphany. I came to really understand what that means for people to be an old soul and to be an old soul woman. And what happens during the course of trauma, we tend to put ourselves in the vault. Like if it's important, we put it in the safe, right?
right.
And when we sense danger, we tend to put our soul in the vault, which has two really interesting impacts. One is good, right? We safeguard it.
Hmm.
The other is bad because we put away our eternal power source.
Right.
Then we're left with this human body that is going to eventually run out of gas.
Hmm.
So, what came to me in that epiphany was that in order to actually recover into the unstoppable, boss senorita, so to speak, um, I had to take my old soul out of the vault and put her back in the driver's seat and safeguarded seatbelt.
Right.
And that really altered everything I did about my profession and how I worked with people. And I mean, I felt pretty good at what I did for a living. But once I uncovered that and how you do it makes a difference, once I uncovered those tools, people started really healing. Like the
Yeah.
transformation became really extraordinary. And they started saying things like, I just don't feel the urge to go back to that toxic relationship. I'm not going to put up with people minimizing me or
Hmm.
gaslighting me. And I thought, I got it. I understood,
Right.
yes, God, I heard that. Put
Right.
it into practice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's like that trauma that you have. Like you had a good analogy is like putting that putting it in the driver's seat, the
Mhm.
old soul into the driver's seat. All the stuff, all the experiences, good or bad, but especially the bad ones. The bad ones seem to have the biggest mark on us,
Yeah.
and have the most profound effect if used correctly. But it's like, so many people tend to want to run away from their trauma
Right.
rather than address it, deal with
Right.
it. Like I have mine just sitting on my shoulder all the time. It's here.
Yeah.
And not just the cancer stuff, but just relationship stuff, just financial stuff, just everything that you've been through. You don't want to run away from it. You want to keep it with you and
Right.
use the lessons that you learned from the trauma to adapt to your current life, to what's going on now, and how you can use those lessons to better approach the stuff that you're going to go through now, because we're all still going to have those types of experiences, bad relationships, bad financial decisions, or whatever other people might be going through, but using the trauma from the past to address it better and have better results, hopefully.
Yeah,
um,
definitely. I often tell my clients, we weave it into the tapestry that we wear.
that's a good one. Yeah.
You don't put it in a vault, you don't put it
Mm-mm.
away, you don't put it, in a hole, you don't, no, you weave it into that tapestry coat that you wear every day.
Yeah, it's an energy source. And it's not negative. It feels negative at the time, but when you process it, you turn that negativity into an amazing amount of power that you can use in day-to-day life.
Well, and think about what happens when you are protecting a trauma, when you're secreting a trauma, you're having to invest a lot of energy to keep that silent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you wear it, when
Mm-hmm.
it's woven into your tapestry, all of that energy that you were expending, keeping it below the surface, is now available to live your life.
That's a perfect way to say it.
So it's like liberating those energy pockets to be available to us
Right.
just to live.
Yeah, we get so much more bandwidth to go towards other
Oh,
things
yeah.
to, yeah, just to being a better, happier, healthier person. I completely agree with that. Um, so I really want to know if you think back to your past selves, those past versions of you that were in pain. What do you think you would? Um, what would you say to yourself and who you are now today?
Yeah. So if as myself now, what would I tell all those versions of myself that
The past version, your past self. What would you like? How would you see yourself today? What would you say seeing who you are today? Like if you were one of those past peoples in trauma, what would you say seeing who you've become due to the trauma and the way that you've processed it?
so if I were looking from the past at
Exactly.
myself now, like you did it.
Yeah, seeing what you've become after all of that, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
in those moments where you thought like I'm not gonna make it or it's gonna be,
Yeah, yeah,
things are
yeah.
so terrible, but look at you now, like you're thriving. What would you say
Yeah.
to yourself then?
I mean, and I don't, yeah, I think about that interview that I told you about, right? That the interview that has not happened yet. I don't have it. Maybe it's the interview with you. Yeah. Um, it's interesting because that is probably my link to myself now is probably what kept me alive as a teenager
Hmm.
because I heard it so many times. I
Right.
knew that I was going to make it. I even knew kind of what, like I knew, oh, it's not just going to be becoming a therapist. Like, no, I knew that it was more like becoming a shaman or a guru
Hmm.
or, what might be called a bodhisattva. I knew that I was not finished undergoing pain
Hmm.
and I knew that the pain wouldn't stop me. So I would probably just congratulate myself for actually making it through. And from my angle this way, I've done many times, gone to those versions of myself that were, had to experience extraordinary pain. And sometimes it's just a quiet dory to just
Hmm.
keep swimming. It's okay. Just keep
Right.
swimming.
Yeah, and we have to sometimes.
Absolutely. Even now, today,
Yeah.
there are times where I hear that line from that movie, and it goes through my mind, and I think, okay, I'll just keep swimming.
Right. Don't know where I'm going, but I'm gonna go, right?
Yeah. Okay, something's coming up. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
just keep swimming.
Yeah, that's right. So you've seen it both ways. You're able to look
Yeah.
past and like you said, from the past, you've already kind of looked forward and seen, like you said, even the 80-year-old version of yourself. So
Yes.
that's a interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Apparently, at some point, I'm going to cut my hair again.
are
This was really just because, when you don't have hair, you know,
you not liking the hairdo or what?
I
I think it
think
looks
it's
good.
like I haven't done a big cut since I grew it back because I kind of curious like it's kind of fun to have hair and it's also kind of fun to see what happens with it, but In
Right.
the interview, I had short hair. So
Okay. Yeah.
I
So I guess
wonder
we'll
if at
see.
some point in time I'll go back to short
Yeah,
hair.
you'll have a
Uh,
change of heart at some point, right?
Never know.
Well, I think yeah, that was a lot to take in as far as I mean, like you said, you've gone through so much, and it's all it was all for a greater purpose, and I'm glad to hear that. But now I'm curious, what lessons would you share with someone who feels like their trauma has sort of defined them?
Yeah. Um, I would say, trauma has the capacity to mold who we are, but it will never define us. I
Hmm.
look at how my traumas have molded my path,
Hmm.
you know, but they don't truly define me. I came in as an old soul, and I do believe I came in on a mission.
Hmm.
I wasn't, immediately aware of what that was. I did try to be a good servant. I did try to follow
Hmm.
to the best of my ability, but it didn't become crystal clear to me what I was, meant to do or offer others until later in my life. I think that I would encourage, and I have encouraged thousands of patients and clients along the way to really allow the trauma to exist separately from who you are, to let it
Okay.
sit in front of you so you can study it, but to know that, we are not our bodies, we are not our minds, we are not our emotions. We are the existence that dwells in this human, this meat suit.
Right. Right.
And so that is really truly not governed by trauma. We've got a physical meat suit that, yes, has undergone something
Hmm.
and it's impacted, mind, body, spirit. But at the end of the day, the core soul is a slice of God. It's not a slice of
Hmm.
the human, right? It's the part
Right.
of us that is actually not affected.
Right. That's what I like to say is kind of like we aren't the things that happen to us. We are what how we respond to those things, right? So all these traumatic things that happen, whether due to the decisions we made or just by chance, those things again, they don't define us. Those things are going to happen whether you made a bad decision or whether someone made a bad decision that impacted you in a traumatic way. That doesn't define who you are, but how you respond to those things, like you said, being able to separate yourself from the trauma and process what happened, um, and then respond to it accordingly.
Yeah.
And again in a way that's conducive to benefit your own well-being, your own spiritual well-being, your own mental well-being, and then everything else kind of falls in line, after that, right?
Yeah. I think that, if we allow it, if we are capable of relating to our traumas in this way, they can open doors for us,
Hmm.
positive doors
Right, doors that you never
that
thought
you
you
may
would go
never have
through.
even considered, right?
Right, or doors that
But
you didn't
at the
even know
same time,
existed, right?
we do have to unpack those traumas, right? We do have
Right.
to allow ourselves to experience and to process, as you said,
Yep.
before we can probably truly appreciate the gifts that are inherent in our traumatic experience.
Hmm.
I think that comes, later when we've kind of done the work for our post-traumatic growth.
Hmm. Absolutely. So then, a question would be, how can people begin to reconnect with themselves or with others or with a higher power, in your opinion?
Yeah, I love the simple work. I have a friend of mine who wrote a book called God Talks. Ed Rush, he's a former U.S. fighter pilot, and the reason I love God Talks, first of all, I love Ed because he's hysterical, and he as an advisor and as a mentor has
Mm.
simplified how to do things that other people make difficult.
People do
And
that a lot, don't they?
oh my gosh, yes. And one of the things that yeah, I think he put it off for a while until he realized, no, this is really okay for me to be this guy, like
Hmm.
out loud. I'm going to live this out loud. And he started to share his very simple techniques for really uploading that spiritual connection. And he has one about the lies we tell ourselves, and he'll say, okay, And I want you to ask the question, ask it in the silence, what are the lies I tell about myself? What are the lies I tell about myself, like to me?
Right.
And then you listen for the answer and you write it down. And then the second question is, what is the truth?
Hmm.
And you listen to the answer and you write it down.
Right.
And that process, and anybody who, people should buy the book, God Talks, and just, go through it with him. But
Right.
um, that process of allowing yourself to listen to those answers, it's amazing when you allow God to come through you. Like it's
Hmm.
amazing how simple it can be to get to know yourself from an entirely different angle.
Right.
To contemplate, when people say something like, oh, well, I'm stupid. I don't amount to anything. I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm never going to be able to get past this trauma.
Hmm.
Right. And then they ask the question, well, what's the truth? And of course, God is there to say that none of that's true. I
Right.
made you in my own image. You're perfect.
Right.
You're whole, perfect, and complete. There's nothing you need to do. But hey, if you want to spend a little time and have some fun at it, let's try this, by the
Yeah.
way.
And the concept of it, it sounds so easy, right? Where, like you said, you're just kind of acknowledging where you're lying to yourself and then telling yourself the truth. Unfortunately, I think some people are so deep in their own lies that they don't even realize that they're lying to themselves. They
Yeah.
don't realize how much power they actually have over their own lives. And going through these things and like you said, like, feeling the power of God, feeling like a greater power really let you know that it can be easy. But unfortunately, some people have those walls and those blocks put up
Yeah.
and those blinders on, and they just do, they can't even conceptualize that they're making it harder on themselves by the way that they're thinking and the way that they keep lying to themselves. And, it's really unfortunate, but I mean, you put it so simply, and I wish that more people could understand that.
Well, and for those who are really feeling blocked, who are really having that experience, I mean, I will say, Ed and I do it slightly differently, but we do it from the same space, right? We
Hmm.
trust our own connection, our own intuition, if you will, to guide us forward. And so I think when people do get stuck, I can think of a client of mine who was really stuck, couldn't do this for herself. She couldn't
Hmm.
do the process because she couldn't trust that the answer she would hear would be what God had to offer her.
Hmm.
So I said, it's okay. I'll be your middleman. I'll step in and I will listen and I will write it down. You write it down too. We'll both write it down. Then we'll share what comes up after we've done the experience. And I've done that with hundreds of clients.
Hmm.
And so if they get in their own way, if they truly cannot hear the truth of who they are at that soul level,
Hmm.
I can hear it. It's not a problem. Like
That's
that's part
awesome.
of my gift, so I can
Yeah.
offer up what I've heard. And sometimes that will help them leapfrog enough.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, I think it brings on tears, men, women alike. And
Yeah.
through the tears is the relief of hearing that they're not forsaken, right? That they
Hmm.
are more even than what they've allowed themselves to be, or that they're different, or that they can be favored or adored or cherished.
Hmm.
And that's an amazing gift that I
Yeah.
can offer. Like I said, I guess I got it genetically. That's what I have to say about it. Or God just said,
Yeah.
you're going to need this skill. So
I mean, however you got it, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, like we already talked about, you've stepped into your purpose. You've been able to help people, even if it was just one person, two people. It doesn't matter. You're using your gift to empower others and to help other people find that strength and just improve their lives. Again, like we talked about in the very beginning, quality of life is what matters the most. It doesn't matter if you help somebody feel saved and then they pass away the next day. At least they can have that couple of hours or that day of
yeah.
an amazing quality of life, and that's
And
really
that
what it's all about.
transition work is something that I have done as part of my job. And I feel blessed to do it, and I feel blessed to give families
Hmm.
the relief of their loved one transitioning in the light, rather
Hmm.
than in fear.
Yeah, it feels so good when I mean, obviously the stuff that we've gone through didn't feel good at the time, but being able to use those things to help other people feel the good feelings that we felt after the transition, like that to me feels better than everything else because it's like someone would have been kept, they would have kept spiraling downward. They would have stayed in the darkness. They would have stayed being weak or whatever the case may be. And it just feels so good when you're able to help somebody find the light and find their own strength. And that's really
Yeah.
why I'm doing all of this. You know, I really want people to know that they they have the power to change their lives. And it's not as hard as it seems. You just have to put in a little bit of work. It's
Yeah.
definitely possible.
And you're not alone.
And you're definitely not alone. We can attest to that. I'm going to hopefully speak to a lot more people, and we're going to have a lot of experiences to help try to prove that. And you've already talked to, like you said, thousands of people to help, you know, find that strength.
Yeah.
Um, and so I want to kind of finish off, and I really want to ask you, it's a very broad, general question, but I just want to know, what does healing mean to you?
I think I'll go back to this notion of true healing, true transformation is when you can put your soul back into the driver's seat. It's when nothing else is driving your life. When that soul, when that relationship with God is capable of taking you wherever you need to go,
Hmm.
towards or away.
Right,
That
right.
to me is true healing. When that core soul can be making those decisions and carrying you forward.
Yeah.
That to me is when that's healing.
Yeah, and I think honestly, it's taking you away from things and towards something all at the same time. Sometimes you
All at
just
the
don't
same
know
time,
what
yeah.
it's taking you towards, as you're just going, like the Dory
Yeah,
reference, where you're just going and you just keep swimming, and
yeah,
eventually you're gonna run right into your purpose. It's gonna smack you
yeah,
right in the face.
right.
So, okay, and Sage, did you have something that you wanted to share with the audience as well?
Yeah, I mean, we touch base on the fact that, you're not alone. Even when you feel alone, you're not alone. We're all out there to support one another. And I am a resource. So if anybody wants to receive support from me, there's a contact form on my website, which is just sagebreslin.com. I also have the rosesystem.com, which does talk about my work with spiritually driven, high achieving professional women, looking for all those female leaders who are ready to rise up and be reckoned with. And then the other thing about old souls is that I made a little quiz. So if people want to know what kind of old soul women they are, they can just go to www.oldsoulwomen.com and there's a quiz there. There will eventually be an oldsoulmen.com. I just have not finished that quiz. So if anybody wants to know what their old soul woman archetype is, the quiz will tell you.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I might have to see what kind of old
There you
soul
go.
woman
You
I
can do
am.
it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Your story has been amazing. I know that we didn't get to touch on everything, and there's so much more that you probably have to share. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
I'd
I
love
really
to.
do appreciate you sharing with us, sharing your story, and sharing all of your knowledge. It's been amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Likewise.
yeah, no problem. And again, Sage Breslin, am I saying it right?
Yep.
Sage Breslin. Thank you so much for joining me today. For all of you out there, if this spoke to you in any kind of way, make sure you drop a comment below, share your story. If you maybe have a story to share, then maybe we can get in touch and we can help other people heal. Okay, because
Yeah. And
healing isn't always pretty, but it is always possible. So
yeah,
until
I
next
love that.
time, you guys, thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, and Sage, did you have something that you wanted to share with the audience as well?
Yeah, I mean, we touch base on the fact that, you're not alone. Even when you feel alone, you're not alone. We're all out there to support one another. And I am a resource. So if anybody wants to receive support from me, there's a contact form on my website, which is just sagebreslin.com. I also have the rosesystem.com, which does talk about my work with spiritually driven, high achieving professional women, looking for all those female leaders who are ready to rise up and be reckoned with. And then the other thing about old souls is that I made a little quiz. So if people want to know what kind of old soul women they are, they can just go to www.oldsoulwomen.com and there's a quiz there. There will eventually be an oldsoulmen.com. I just have not finished that quiz. So if anybody wants to know what their old soul woman archetype is, the quiz will tell you.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I might have to see what kind of old
There you
soul
go.
woman
You
I
can do
am.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And so I want to kind of finish off, and I really want to ask you, it's a very broad, general question, but I just want to know, what does healing mean to you?
I think I'll go back to this notion of true healing, true transformation is when you can put your soul back into the driver's seat. It's when nothing else is driving your life. When that soul, when that relationship with God is capable of taking you wherever you need to go,
Hmm.
towards or away.
Right,
That
right.
to me is true healing. When that core soul can be making those decisions and carrying you forward.
Yeah.
That to me is when that's healing.
Yeah, and I think honestly, it's taking you away from things and towards something all at the same time. Sometimes you
All at
just
the
don't
same
know
time,
what
yeah.
it's taking you towards, as you're just going, like the Dory
Yeah,
reference, where you're just going and you just keep swimming, and
yeah,
eventually you're gonna run right into your purpose. It's gonna smack you
yeah,
right in the face.
right.
So, yeah, I mean, your story has been amazing. I know that we didn't get to touch on everything, and there's so much more that you probably have to share. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
I'd
I
love
really
to.
do appreciate you sharing with us, sharing your story, and sharing all of your knowledge. It's been amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Likewise.
yeah, no problem. And again, Sage Breslin, am I saying it right?
Yep.
Sage Breslin. Thank you so much for joining me today. For all of you out there, if this spoke to you in any kind of way, make sure you drop a comment below, share your story. If you maybe have a story to share, then maybe we can get in touch and we can help other people heal. Okay, because
Yeah.
healing
And
isn't always it is healing isn't always pretty, but it is always possible. So
yeah,
until
I
next
love that.
time, until next time, you guys, thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you.